Good evening, everyone. My name's Martin, and it's been brilliant to be with you guys over the last few days. And if you've not been around, it's been a real treat. We've had Paul and Fiona Jones doing some songs, doing some harmonica stuff going on. Heard their story. Last night we had some Matt Baggott, who spent a bit of time in Northern Ireland. He was in charge of the police there. So a great kind of time there. And we're going to have another brilliant time tonight with someone who actually is from a particular place that Matt Baggott may have worked. We'll find out a bit more about that in a minute. Plot spoiler. Over to Emma. Do you want to come up, Emma? Should we give Emma a warm welcome? Have a seat, Emma. Good to see you. So Emma, you made a bit of a trek up here today. You're from a very beautiful, picturesque part of the world where you live currently. Can you tell us a bit about that wonderful place that you're currently living in? Where is it?
Yes, so I am currently living in Eastbourne. Anyone here been to Eastbourne?
Yeah.
The good thing about Eastbourne is it's a retirement capital, which means that because we go to the same church, we'll both be young, pretty much into our 90s. So it's a bonus, but it is a nice place. We're by the beach and we're by the South Downs as well. So yeah,
it's the place to be. You've got to breathe in the air. It says down there, breathe it in. But Emma, you clearly are not from Eastbourne originally with the accent. Can you tell us a bit about where you were born and raised?
Okay, so I was born and raised. Am I too loud? Should I move this down a bit? No, you sure? Okay, because the accent, if you can understand the accent, you're winning already. So yes, born and raised in Belfast, and I come from a family. I have a younger brother, younger sister, and Belfast is amazing. If you haven't gone, you should go. It's it's where they built the Titanic, which probably actually doesn't sell it to you. But the saying in Northern Ireland was it was fine when it left us. So that tells you a bit about the Irish people as well.
Brilliant. Great. So Belfast, you get a nice ticket on Ryanair, get across nice and cheap, apart from if you're taking luggage. But anyway, Belfast. What was it like growing up? I guess kind of 80s, 90s. What was it like in Belfast? For us who were from England, and a very different experience. So what was it like in Belfast?
So growing up in Belfast, that was the time of the Troubles. You might have heard a bit about that last night if you were here. So a lot of infighting, often between Republicans and Loyalists, between often Protestants and Catholics. A lot of violence, car bombs going off most days, but we grew up in it, and so it was just sort of normal life to us. So my boyfriend, his dad was blown up in a car bomb, and most people knew people who had been affected by it. But it was only really whenever I moved over here that I saw that there was a very different sort of world. We were used to going into the shopping centre, and you'd hear somebody or the tannoy going, "There is a bomb in the building, can you make your way out?" And everyone would be like, "Oh, for goodness sake," and would puddle out, and everyone get their bags and all the rest. It was just what we were used to. Lovely place, very friendly people, quite a religious place, but I would say somewhere where people were very big on morals, but didn't necessarily, and we knew a lot about God, but we didn't necessarily have a relationship with Jesus himself, and I'll talk a bit about that in a wee bit. So but very different now, very friendly, everybody knows everybody else. It's a unique place, it's a lovely place, it's got my heart still.
More so than Eastbourne.
Yes, good so.
Shed a tear. You're right, okay, so a very religious kind of place. How was it in terms of your family? So you've got a brother and sister, mum, dad. Was it quite a religious, Christian-y kind of family? How was it for you?
So yeah, my family weren't Christians growing up. I suppose in every family, everybody's got their own kind of role, don't you? You know, you've got, I don't know, one of you might be the golden child, or one of you might be the black sheep, or you get a role that you're given when you're 5 or 6, and even when you're 18 or 19, you don't shed it. So in my family, my brother, my youngest brother, he's like the charmer. He'd have been the good-looking one. My sister was the brainy one, and I would have been the moral one. So win-win for me. And my parents weren't believers, but we went along to Sunday school, and we were a very close-knit family. But again, when I went to Sunday school and when I went to church, I went to a church in the mornings that talked an awful lot about God the Father, and it was all about rules and it was all about regulations. And the idea of God that I got there was, he was kind of like a big headmaster, And if you kept his rules and you didn't do anything too bad, then he wouldn't smite you. He'd kind of stare to your way if you didn't murder anybody. But he wasn't really very interested in you. But then I had a friend from school, and she went to a different kind of church in the evenings, and that church was all about the Holy Spirit. And her church was all about how it was about feelings, and it was about if you felt like God was with you, then that's how you knew, that you were. So my idea of God was all very mixed up. This idea of a very strict father, this idea of a kind of a groovy Holy Spirit, emotional person. And I really wanted to know about God, but I never really joined the dots about where Jesus came kind of in the middle. And so I think that was quite important then to how I grew up.
Yeah.
So me being quite moral, I was always, what I would say, like a good girl. Like I would love to say to you, I was a rebel, and I was out there with fast cars and all the rest, but I wasn't, even my first day at infant school, we went in and there was a sand pit, and I remember I chased everybody else out of the sand pit, and I spent the day smoothing the sand so that all the sand was within the lines and walking around to make sure nobody made any mess. And that, if you like, is a picture of what I'm like as a person. I like rules, I like regulations, I like to know where I stand, and I want to be able to make things right, but I want to do it by myself.
Right.
So that also then fed into this idea of who I was as a teenager. And so when I got to the age of about 11 or 12, I felt very secure. I knew who I was, I knew where I fitted in the world, but it seemed to me that life was all about being good. And if you were good, then the scary headmaster God wouldn't do anything to you, and you'd know where you were, and good things would happen to you. But then when I hit puberty and different things in my life started to change. So for example, my granddad died, and that was the first person who had died that was close to me. And up until then, my mum and dad had all the answers to everything. They could make everything okay. But I remember saying to my dad, well, look, I miss my granddad, what's happened to him? And my dad went, well, he's dead, he's gone to the worms, it's the circle of life, it's all fine. And I remember at the time thinking, that is not fine, and thinking for the first time, death has come in, and they don't have any answers. And then there were other things as well. I changed schools, and I was being bullied at school. There were these ideas of what a woman was meant to look like on TV and, on the magazines and all the rest. And I felt like that was not me at all. I wanted to be out there playing with the boys. I didn't look like the girls that I saw. I didn't act like them. At school, I was bullied. I felt like, I went to a girls' school, and I felt like everybody else knew the right words to say and the right things to do. And I always said things wrong, and I always got things wrong, and I didn't fit in. And of course, I was hitting puberty as well. So my body was changing. And I felt like instead of being this wee 3-year-old in the sand pit where things, there were the rules and I could keep them and I knew who I was, I knew where I belonged, I felt like I was a mess. My body was a mess. It was spilling out in ways that it hadn't been before. And I wanted to be like this table. I wanted to be clean and shiny and hard with sharp edges and know who I was. And instead it felt like I had all of these questions. Who is God? What is life about? Why don't I fit in? What happens when you die? What does it mean to be a woman? Why is the world so scary and people I know of are getting blown up in the streets? We were also learning in the news about something called AIDS. That was the first time we heard about it. And so even in my own little world of school and family, things were happening that were out of control. But then in the bigger world in Northern Ireland, and then in the wider world, across, people were dying, things were happening, and I couldn't control it. And it was scary, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I wanted to clean up that mess.
Wow. So externally, the world is a mess out there. Internally, things are a mess.
Absolutely.
Loads of questions about everything, and just quite a scary time. So how did you cope? What did you do to try and cope with all those kind of questions about what life's about and what's beyond the grave, and what about AIDS, and all these huge things that are just blowing off in your mind? How did you cope? What did you do?
Well, I guess if you're a good girl, you're not going to go off the rails in certain kinds of ways. I was never going to be off with male models and fast cars and taking drugs. For me, the drug that I discovered was changing my own body. And it's funny, isn't it? You know, even I've got kids, I've got a daughter and a son, they're 10 and 7. And if you're young and you're that age, there's not very much of the world that you can control, is there? But the one thing you can control is what you eat. You see that in Northern Ireland, we saw it with hunger strikers, but you see it with a baby as well. You know, a wee 2-year-old that's sitting in front of you can't do very much, but they can tell you they're not going to have that broccoli. And that for me was a secret kind of thing that I stumbled upon, that there was one area of my life that I could control, and that was my body. And it was like my own private universe, and it felt like all of the feelings and all the questions and all the fears and all the worries and all the pain and all the mess and everything, if I could shrink my body, it felt like I could shrink those fears as well. Like if I made myself physically smaller, I could make those fears and clean up the mess that was inside of me as well. And so that was how I guess I kind of stumbled upon anorexia, which I didn't know was a thing then. It wasn't something we'd heard about like we have these days. You know, this was Northern Ireland in the 1990s, and mental health was not talked about. You know, people did not have eating disorders. It was just this weird magic thing that I found where if I controlled what I ate, I could make my body change, and it felt like I was powerful. It felt like if I could shrink myself, like even though I was out of control and even though I was physically weak, I felt really strong. I felt like I was in charge, and it felt powerful. And so that for me was the beginning, I guess, of trying to make sense of life and trying to control everything, because I couldn't control what happened at school. I couldn't control death. I couldn't control who God was. I couldn't control things in my family, but I could shrink my own body.
Wow.
And it was like discovering a drug. The smaller I became, the more powerful I felt. And that became an identity for me. And it wasn't, for me anyway, it wasn't that I looked in the mirror and I thought, I want to be a smaller dress size, or I want to look a different way. It wasn't about what I looked like. It wasn't even about feeling like I was fat. Fat wasn't necessarily my shape. It was the mess that was me. It was a word to describe all of the things that I felt, everything that was wrong, all the things that I could change. And so it wasn't just, you know, I want to fit into a smaller dress size or anything like that. It was something that would give me an identity. It was a feeling of power and control. It was like being God over my own little universe, this little secret, this thing that I had discovered that was more important than anything else. But the thinner I got and the more in control I felt, the more out of control, as you'll know if you've experienced an eating disorder yourself, or if you know anyone who has one. You know, you feel like you've got control, but you're out of control. You feel like you're in charge, but you're not. And the more weight you lose, the more the spiral continues. And then you start covering things, you start hiding, and it becomes your whole life. Yeah. And what you think you're in charge of is actually in charge of you instead.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and giving us a window into kind of the motivations and what's going on in the head and the heart. Really powerful. So obviously your body was shrinking, and it was hard to kind of think and be clear. How did your family kind of react? Did they see these changes happening, or was it all kind of under the radar? How did it all kind of be exposed, I guess, in one way?
Yeah, well, it's funny, isn't it? Because, you know, when I talk to you guys about this, it seems very obvious. You'd be like, well, why didn't our parents do anything earlier? But the thing is that I was wearing lots of different layers of clothes. I knew that this was something, a secret that I had, and if it was taken away, it felt like you were taking away my very life. Okay, it felt like you were taking away my very identity. So I was really keen to cover it up. So loads of excuses. I've already eaten, you know, wearing things, exercising and all the rest, doing things in secret that people didn't know about. The person who first noticed, I think, the change in me was the girl who was bullying me at school, funnily enough, and she said, you know, you've got very thin, are you all right? And I was like, yeah, cheers, love, I'm fine.
And was that kind of like had she kind of flipped into actually this is a compassionate question? Was that just more kind of like...
I don't really know. Yeah, I don't really know, but I started getting sick. We went along to the doctor at the time. Again, eating disorders, they were the sort of thing that happened to celebrities like Karen Carpenter on TV. It was not something that happened to a normal family like mine, you know. Mental health stuff, this was just this weird thing. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, you seem a bit thin, but probably you just need to get some more exercise, so maybe you should do a bit more exercise and just eat better. And of course, me being me, I was like, yep, I think I can do that, and then threw myself into it. Fast forward a couple of months later, and I was really, really unwell, and I couldn't hide it anymore. And we went back to the doctors again, and the doctor said, basically, you're going to die in a few weeks if we can't get you help.
Wow.
And then I got...
So super serious.
Yeah,
at that stage,
yeah.
It got really, really bad.
Yeah. And I went for treatment in Northern Ireland, you know, that was really, it was really good in some ways because it saved my life. But again, at this time, it focused really on one thing. And I mean, eating disorders, the treatment for them is very different, but for something like anorexia, you want to treat the disorder, but you also want to treat someone's mind. But here's the thing, if you lose a certain amount of weight, your brain and your heart, you know, being organs as well, they shrink too. So what I would have said at the time was, look, if you give me therapy, then we'll address the weight gain later on. But you can't actually take therapy because your brain is breaking down too. So until you get back up to a certain weight again, you can't process the therapy. So you need both at the same time. But for me, back then in Northern Ireland, the therapy focused just on regaining weight. And so what happened was I got back up to the age of 18, looked much better on the outside, weight restored, but really I'd put my family through absolute hell. You know, my mum and dad and my brother and sister who'd been sidelined for years. It was awful for all of them, because you can imagine you're watching your own child, someone you love, and they're killing themselves, starving themselves to death right in front of you, and other people can see it, but you can't stop it. It's this horrible, horrible cycle, and your brother and sister get pushed to one side because you're the one that's dying, but they also need help, and you know, it's this absolute mess. And the funny thing was, I guess I went into anorexia thinking it would solve things, you know. I thought I was a mess, and it seemed like the thing would fix me, but it only made stuff worse. And so when I hit 18, it felt like I really had now totally wrecked everything, wrecked my family, wrecked my life, everything, and there was no way back. So looked like I was a lot better, and I really felt like, okay, now I've got to make up for all of this, because you know, this has just been a nightmare for everybody. And the good girl, you know, flips into gear again. Right. But this time, I thought, okay, I'm going to be good by getting good grades. I'm going to go to university. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be good by, I'm going to throw myself into this religion thing. You know, this headmaster God, well, I'm going to learn about the Bible and teach it. I'm going to be the best at whatever I do. I'm going to get that top grades. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be a church worker, and I'm going to make it all better and fix everything. And I'm never going to talk about this awful anorexia thing. We're going to put it behind us. Right. But again, I'll fix it by myself.
Yeah.
So but just in a different arena.
Wow. And were there other kind of mental health issues going on as well as the thing that was driving anorexia?
Yeah, there were. I mean, it's funny. Whenever I was treated for anorexia, I developed OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. You probably heard of it, you know, where you start thinking things in your head, and then you develop patterns, rituals to try and stop the thoughts that are going on in your head. So you might think something like, for me it was fear of being contaminated. I was worried, and again, the stuff about AIDS and so on fed into this, you know, I thought, there's germs on me, and if I don't get rid of those germs, then something bad will happen to me or the people that I love. And that sounds really, really weird in some ways, but actually it's just like anorexia, except in a different sphere. You've got all of these worries, all of this mess and this panic, and you develop a system to try and deal with it. So with anorexia, it's, you know, the problem here is fat. I'm going to shrink the fat. With OCD, for me, with germs, the problem is dirt, and I'm going to get rid of the dirt. And I'm going to wash my hands, you know, 40 times over and over, which is what I did. Wash my hands with bleach until they were bleeding. And I remember my mum, you know, they had to lock the cupboards in the house. And my poor mum, dear love her, she was like, Emma, is there any mental health issue that you do not have? Because I had anxiety and I was self-harming. And again, self-harm, what's going on there for me? There's a mess. Yeah. And if I cut myself, then I can see, I can show that the mess is there, but I clean it up. you know, I bear the scars on me. I take them in my own body. So I had depression and anxiety and OCD, and it seemed like I just had every single problem that was on the planet. But really, it was just that I was frightened and afraid and messed up, and it came out in lots of different ways. And quite often for someone who's being treated for mental health issues, if you get treatment for one thing, something else will pop up. It's a bit like whack-a-mole, you know, that game where you play with the crocodile's eye, and you hit one, you get the anorexia one down, and then up pops OCD, and it's not that you are really screwed up in a million different ways, and it's just that you're trying to find different ways to make life work. And when one thing gets pushed down, another.
So the same issue manifesting in different ways.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. So age 18, you're physically you're doing much better, which is great. And you obviously you were about to head off to university. You went to a very good university. You're a very bright person. Can you tell us where you went and what you spent to study?
So I went to Oxford. I was always really good at English. Terrible at maths. I mean, off the scale good at English, but off the scale bad in maths. Like me, that's just typical me. I always do things to extremes. And so I got into Oxford, and of course that was me going, right, here we go. I'm going to prove to everybody that I'm smart. I'm going to make it all better. So I worked really hard. I did well at university, and afterwards I met a guy there who's my now husband.
Yeah,
Would you hear
this? Tell us about this man. Was it love at first sight?
It was not love at first sight. So I married a guy called Glenn, and we met at university, but his girlfriend at the time was my best friend. And I told her she could do an awful lot better. And I really did mean that. Like, I just took against him. I just thought he was a total idiot. So we were friends for a wee while. Yeah, I know. And I was dating somebody else. And then after university, I think both of us had learned about God. And we both at university thought, we kind of knew that there was a God, but we hadn't really met him properly, you know? So again, this idea, there's a God who's about rules, but he's also kind of about the Holy Spirit, and I don't quite know where that all fits in. And it was sort of mixed up. But then after university, Glenn, he went back to Australia, which is where he's from, and he started reading about the Bible and stuff, and I was kind of on the same path, but back in the UK. So we emailed each other, and that was sort of
Generation X, definitely here. Yeah. Email, not texting or anything yet.
And anyway, long story short, he came back over. We started meeting up together. I was converted to Glenn, along with being converted to God. And we were reading about the Bible. And we were reading about this person in the Bible called Jesus. And I was starting to connect the dots to a faith that I was teaching about myself, but still didn't really understand. So I was learning, look, there's God the Father, and there's God the Holy Spirit, and there's God the Son, Jesus, who dies for our sins. And that means that you can be forgiven and have a good relationship with God. And I kind of believed that, but here's the funny thing. I knew a lot about God, but I kind of didn't feel like it was for me. I felt like in some ways, even though I was teaching, because I was a children's worker at the time, teaching at the front of church, and I told people about this Jesus and about the cross, but it felt like in some ways I was too good for him, and I was also too bad. So I felt like I could still kind of fix things by myself. I didn't really understand why I would need him or the cross. And I also felt like I had stuffed things up so badly, and there was such a mess inside me that actually, if anybody got close and they saw it really, he couldn't deal with it enough. So I was holding out this good news for other people, but
for yourself, it's still quite confused.
Yeah.
And eventually you got married to Glenn, and
I did.
You went off to a theological college, a Bible college to study, and you were doing this kind of church role, with children's work role. Mm-hmm. But anorexia kind of reared its head again, didn't it? So do you want to share a bit about that?
So Glenn told me originally he was going to be a cricket star or he was going to be a rock star, right? Vicar was not in the equation for me. I thought he was going to do stand-up comedy or something like that. But things came to, he decided he wanted to be a vicar. And gradually, when we were at theological college, I realised that this was going to make me a vicar's wife. Now, the sort of person, I was really excited. The sort of person I told you about, think again of this 12 or 13-year-old. I don't even feel like a woman. okay? Let alone a vicar's wife. For me, in Northern Ireland anyway, vicar's wives aren't just women, they're like uber women, okay? They're like the most feminine, the most godly, lovely, open home, come on in. I've made 100 flapjacks and yeah, come and stay. And it's just everything that I was not. And honestly, the thought of it really panicked me, but I didn't quite know how to get out of it. And Glenn got a job as a curate in Eastbourne. And I was going to be going down there to be a vicar's wife. And honestly, I was so frightened. I just thought, I can't do this. I can't be this woman, this godly person that everybody wants me to be, because I'm just an absolute mess. And I went back to my old ways of coping, and the old ways of coping were not eating. Only this time I didn't have my mum and dad there to help force feed me spaghetti. And if you're working with someone who has an addiction of any kind, eating disorder, drugs, alcohol, whatever, you'll know yourself. If someone's an adult and they want to follow their own path, you can do your very best alongside them to try and get them help. But no matter how much you do, it's very, very difficult if they're determined to go down that road. Whenever it was starting up again, I went back to the doctors and said, look, I've got a history of eating disorders and I think it's coming back again. And the doctor said, we'd love to help you, but you're not sick enough yet. You'd have to lose more weight to qualify for care because, the system is overloaded as it is. So I went away and did exactly that. But then when I lost more weight, I reached the point where I didn't want to get help anymore. So Glenn and I kind of fell between I kept saying I'm going to get better, and I really believed that I could. I really believed every day that I would get better, and yet I wasn't. I was getting worse and worse. I think we went on a holiday to a friend's cottage somewhere, and we were there, and there was one night I got a phone call from home, and it was from my mum. And she said, your granny has died. Now, my granny, I'm sure you've got great grannies, but my granny was really a great granny, okay? She was like one of the people I was closest to in the world, especially growing up. To tell you about her, she was just the life and soul. You know, when you're with someone and they just make you laugh, and they rub off love on you. She was brilliant. She used to do jigsaw puzzles, right? And she'd do 1,000 jigsaws. And when she got bored of it, she would just get the scissors out. she'd cut the bits she didn't like. She'd go, life's too short. And then she'd sweep the board. And she was just brilliant.
If she had a Rubik's Cube, I guess she would have peeled off the stickers and made it all look good.
She was a bit of a renegade, my granny, and I loved her to bits. She had died, and it was her funeral. And the reality was that I was dying as well. And I was too sick to get over there. My mum and dad had already been through anorexia with me as a child, and they didn't know how bad things were, but I was a skeleton at this time. And you see pictures, don't you, sometimes of people who are, they're quite gracefully thin, and they look very beautiful with it, and they've got these lovely cheekbones and all the rest. But the reality is just really grim. The reality was my hair was falling out, my nails had turned back, my internal organs were shutting down. I had hair all over my body to try and keep my body warm. And I remember there was one day whenever Glenn had gone out and I went up to try to get something, and I fell over in the kitchen. I passed out. I wet myself on the floor, and I got up because I realised that I wet myself and there was some water that had come out of me, and I wanted to go and weigh myself again. So I was crawling across the floor, having wet myself, the skeleton, trying to find out what weight I was. And that is the face of anorexia when it comes down to it. It was something that promised me so much and actually took everything from me. And so that night, Glenn had gone to bed, and I was sitting in front of the fire. And sometimes it's like you look at yourself from the outside. And it was like I was looking at myself from the outside, and I was like, I have been saying for years I'm going to get better, and I really believe that I am, but I'm actually a skeleton here sitting in front of the fire, and I'm as close to death as my granny was, and she was the person in the world that I loved most, and I can't get over there to say goodbye to her at the funeral because of what I've done to myself. And I would love to say that I'm going to get better, and I say it every single day, but I'm not. I'm dying myself, and I don't know what to do. And I guess in that moment, I kind of cried out to God. Not the headmaster God, not the God of the fuzzy feelings, but Jesus, this God that I've been talking about but didn't really know for myself. And I had a Bible in front of me because we'd been picking out readings for my mum's funeral. for my granny's funeral. And so I opened it up, and now, excuse me reading, I'm reading this is an excerpt from the Bible, but it's actually from my book. The reason is I've got bad eyesight, and this is big print, so I should be reading it from the Bible for you. It is in the Bible, but the big print here means I'm going to read it from this. So I opened up the Bible, and there's a book in the Bible, the end of the Bible, called Revelation, and it's a vision that John has of the world to come. And he describes, he's got this picture of Jesus. Here's what he says about Jesus. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp double-edged sword. His face, the face of Jesus, was like the sun shining in all of its brilliance. And I read that description of Jesus. You know, I had always felt in life like I was too much for everybody. Double concentrate. I was a mess, and I needed to keep myself in. I needed to make myself smaller. But here was someone who was more intense than I was, more concentrated, more brilliant. Someone whose intensity would blow mine out of the water. Someone who would see me as I was and wouldn't say, "You're too much." Someone who could take all of me, the mess, the goodness, and all the badness as well. And I flicked over the pages of the Bible in Revelation, turned to Revelation 5, and there's another description of Jesus, and talks about Jesus as being like a lion, the Lion of Judah. And you know, a lion is the king of the jungle. A lion is the most majestic of all creatures, you know, and it's a picture of the God who made the whole world, a God who holds the universe in his hands, Jesus who made everything, who holds everything in his power. And I had always felt like the world was out of control, and I had to control it. I had to take it on myself. I had to make it safe, whether washing my hands or getting good grades or shrinking my own body. But here was a God who had made everything and who held everything in his hands. And he was saying, look, you don't take control. I have control, and I can be trusted. But there's another description then of Jesus alongside that of the lion, the God who made everything, the God who holds everything, and the God who is powerful and beautiful and terrible and brilliant. And it's a description of a lamb that looks like it's been slain, a lamb that looks like it's been killed. Jesus is the lion, the God who made everything, but also in the book of Revelation, he is a lamb that is killed for the sake of people like me. A God who owns everything and yet makes himself the very smallest animal, a God who is killed, a God who dies on the cross and who says, look, yes, you are a mess, but you're a bigger mess than you ever realized. And you know what? You don't take that in your own body. You don't pay for it yourself. I've paid for it on my body. I take all of your mess on my body and I die for you. And in me, that's where you get the fresh start. Not because you try harder, not because you wear masks, not because you do anything at all, because I love you and because you've got value. And I see you as you are in all of your mess, but I won't leave you that way. And I am the lion and I'm also the lamb. And that is who the Lord of the universe is. And I come down to you in all of your mess. And I say, look, your story is not the end. I will cover over all of your mess with my goodness. I will give you all that I am, and I will take all your badness. And that then, I guess, was the first time really that I'd seen that this Jesus was real. And more importantly, that he was more beautiful than anorexia. Because for me, anorexia was always the God. You know, I remember going into therapy and people would say, what do you stand to lose if you give up on this anorexia thing? And what do you stand to gain? And on one column I would say, well, the good thing about giving up on being anorexic is, I'll look healthier. People won't be so worried about me. I'll fit into a better dress size. It would be nice to go out and have a curry with my mates. But on the side of what I would lose, here's what anorexia meant to me. It gives me a sense of identity. It makes me feel in control. It makes the world safe. It shows me who I am. It makes everything okay. And you weigh those two things up together, and no amount of wanting to go for a curry or be healthy for your friends is going to deal with what it offers. But Jesus is more beautiful than anorexia is. And the thing about anorexia and about all of the good things that I want to do for myself is, the Bible says there's a way of life that looks like it's right. It looks right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. And that's what all of these things were for me. They seemed to be, these ways of fixing myself were all ways that were killing me. But Jesus comes and he says the very opposite. He says, if you come to me, you're going to die in one sense, because you're going to die to yourself, but you're also going to find life. And I'm going to call you into an identity that's more precious, and a world and a story that is more precious than you'd ever realized. And it's not one you build for yourself, and it's not one that is there because of masks that you wear. I love you and I've done everything for you, but will you come and be with me? And that, I guess, was the start then of where things changed.
Yeah. So a really transformational moment in front of that fire, reading about Jesus, the Lion.
Absolutely. Yeah. But in some ways that was an event, but I would say that recovery as well is a process. So I'd love to say, and for some people they meet Jesus and everything changes overnight.
All sunshine and lollipops.
Yeah. But it wasn't that I woke up the next morning and I said to Glenn, honey, let's go to KFC. We're all going to change. It wasn't like that. But it was a long, steady recovery. Was a long, long process. And not just the process of restoring weight, but also the process of learning how to let other people in, how to be honest about feelings, how to be somebody who struggles with their mental health and can talk about it and doesn't try to fix it by themselves. And that's a battle, let me tell you, I'm still fighting every single day. But the joy of Jesus is this. It's not that he fixes you once and then you keep on going by yourself. It's that every single day, that heart, the heart that was anorexic, is still in me. Every morning I wake up and every morning I think, you know what, Emma, you're a bit of a mess. You can fix this yourself. And every day I go back to Jesus and he says, no, I'm going to do it all for you. And that is what gives you the strength then to move forward, to move through an addiction and to start living in a different way. But it's something that for me anyway has taken years and years and years. But it started that night when I saw who Jesus was, when I saw that he was there for me, when I saw that he saw me as I was, unlike anybody else. And he came down to me, but he also called me out. And he calls all of you out, calls all of us out, because everybody's got a heart that's like mine. And you won't struggle necessarily with anorexia. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But the Bible says that everybody has got a heart that is yearning and a heart that wants to fix things and a heart that wants to make the world work for themselves and make themselves presentable. But only Jesus can do that. And he already has. And his invitation is to all of us, and he calls all of us, and he sees all of us. Because I can tell you my story and I can sit down here a wee bit about yours, but I never really truly know your heart. And you don't know mine, but he does, the God of the universe. Comes alongside, knows who you are, knows where you've been, knows where you're going, loves you completely, and carries you completely and calls you into a relationship with him, no matter where you are, no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's anorexia, whether it's mental health stuff, whatever it is, that invitation is open to everybody.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's really, really helpful to hear, that it's coming to Jesus, but then it's walking with him, and it's being a Christian is being a follower of him, walking with him through the ups and downs. When you get knocked down, he lifts you up, and it's great to hear. And there's so many more things we could talk about. I'd see time's kind of running out though. You've got obviously you're married to Glenn. You're following Jesus through the ups and downs. You've got children. How are you finding kind of following Jesus now? Because I guess we can talk about lots of things that's happened in the past. What does Jesus mean to you right today, 2025, here in the Shire of Bedford? What does Jesus mean to you?
Well, I think Jesus is everything to me. He really is. Why am I sitting up here telling you about things that have happened to me that I swore blind I would never tell to another living person? Because you can be yourself, I can be who I am, and the King of the world, the Lord of the universe, stands in front of me and says, I love you and you're mine. And that means that I can step out and just be who I am, knowing that he has got me and knowing that he has called me into his story, and it's not about what I do. Day-to-day life, the heart that I have is still the heart that I had as a 13-year-old. I still want to make the world work for myself. I still have periods of depression and anxiety. Times where life is really hard. I'm not a very good parent. I struggle with a lot of things day to day, and particularly in sort of mental health. I make mistakes all the time. I don't know what I'm doing as a Christian, but Jesus has got me, and he is everything. He is, And that means that there's nothing that I'm going to face that is going to be too big. So a couple of years ago, my mum died of cancer. And I remember thinking, that would have destroyed me before. She came to know the Lord just before she died. And I guess the difference as well is that unlike that 13-year-old for whom the world was a mess and she had to take it on herself, here's a Lord who can deal with everything. Because the world can offer us a lot, can't it? It can fix a lot of things. It can offer us lots of shiny, amazing things, but it doesn't deal with death. And it doesn't deal with sin. It doesn't deal with the things that we do wrong. It doesn't deal with pain. And I don't know where the answers are outside of Jesus Christ. But in him, there is nothing that can separate us from his love. And so that's what Jesus is to me. He's absolutely everything. And without him, I wouldn't get out of bed. But with him, life is scary and messy, but also joyful and multicolored. And yes, I'm a mess, but his beauty is greater than my mess. And that's a wonderful thing. And it's a joy to be able to talk about him to other people and to get to know other people and not to be living under that shame, because he does it all.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much for all your honesty and sharing your story so openly with us. And I'm sure there'll be loads of people who want to chat with you at the end. And there's a couple of books that Emma's got and she's written. Feel free to have a look in the bookstore, talk to Emma about it. There's also, last thing, you've been helping as well with a course, which I know these guys are going to run soon, Christianity Explored.
Yeah.
Can you just share a bit about, in a quick snapshot of what is Christianity Explored, what's been your involvement with it?
Okay, so Christianity Explored is a course that's run for people who want to find out about who is this Jesus. It would have been perfect for someone like me when I was 13. Who is he? Why did he come? What does it mean to follow him? It's a 7 or 8 week course, and we've refilmed it recently. It's been running for years and years, but they've done it recently with some and kind of updated it. And I'm one of the people who is on it with them. Yeah. But it's just one of many courses where you come along, you look at the Bible with a group of people round a table. There's no pressure. You get to ask any question you want, and you just work your way through and you work out, look, is all this stuff that people are saying that, you're going to hear Martin talking about Jesus. You've heard me talking about him. Don't take our word for it. Have a look in the Bible and see for yourself, is he who he says he is? Because if he is, there is nothing more important on the planet than getting to know him. And if he's not, well, at least you've checked it out.
Yeah, brilliant. That's so good. Should we give show Emma a round of applause and appreciation? Thank you, Emma. Great one. Oh, wow, look at this. This is on today. Yesterday, the projection thing didn't quite work, so very grateful for the guys fixing it. It's been great to hear Emma, and as I said up on the stage, it's been great to hear her honesty, how candid she is about the experiences she's been through. And every night, we're interviewing someone, we're listening to their story, and then we're thinking, along that same theme that comes out of their story, what has Jesus got to say then to us in particular? And the best way, I think, of always finding out what Jesus has to say is actually to go, well, what do you say, Jesus? What have you said? What are you saying right now? And the best way is to go and have a look at something from the Bible and find out what Jesus speaks into this situation. And tonight we're thinking about this subject of, is there hope? Is there hope amidst the mess that's in here and the mess that's out there? And I want to share a bit of a story from the Bible, and at different points some of the sentences will come up on the screen. But it's a brilliant story, a true story, happened around 2,000 years ago. And there are two other characters who are pretty central. There's another third one who's pretty crucial as well, but two I want to focus on really in this story I'm about to share. And these two people both are really looking at life, and they're looking at what's going on in their lives, and they are freaking out. They are going absolutely ballistic in their heads and hearts, and they don't know what to do. They're really freaking out about what is taking place. And here's the story. Let me read the start of it, and we'll intersperse it as I go along. But this is the situation. It says, when Jesus, this is from Mark's Gospel, so Mark's one of the biographers of Jesus, and you can find this in the Bible. Mark writes this, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered round him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed round him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him, in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. So you've got these two kind of characters who are going to encounter Jesus. And the first one is Jairus. And Jairus was this guy who was the man. He was the dude. He was what was described there as a synagogue leader. That's back in the day. He would have been like one of the leading lights in that community. Everyone would have looked up to him and thought, here is a respected and honoured man. He's the cat who's got the cream. He's the cat's whiskers, the bee's knees, whatever you want to say. Everyone would be thinking, he's a good guy. And not only is he a good guy in the community, but also he's a guy who's a loving father as well. He's got this beautiful daughter who's 12 years old, and he's been a good father to her. So he's well respected, well loved by the community and, no doubt, his own family as well. So there's Jairus on the one hand. But then on the other, Mark's just told us about this other person. And she's, if you like, a nameless nobody. It's not because that's what God thinks of her, but it's because of what the community around thinks of her. They write her off. They don't want to be near her. And so Mark deliberately doesn't give us her name to emphasize the fact of what she would be feeling from the community around her. So you've got Jairus, who everyone would know and respect and love, a good man. And then you've got this lady who was just despised and rejected, a nameless nobody. And over those past 12 years of their lives, they both had completely different experiences. No doubt Jairus had been loving life. He'd done well and things were going hunky-dory for him. They were sunshine and lollipops for him. But for this poor woman, she'd had the complete opposite end of a life. She'd been struggling and struggling and struggling, as we're about to see. But the fascinating thing is, and I think the reason why Mark brings this story in for us, is because he wants to show, no matter where we fit on all the scales and spectrums out there, that Jesus is for both the Jairus types and the nameless nobody types. That Jesus loves us all and wants us all to come to him with our lives. And both these two people both come to the same conclusions, despite their very different backgrounds. They both come to say, look, I don't have the resources in my life. I can't handle my life. They both come to realize that their greatest need is for Jesus. And they both come to this position where they go, what we all need in life is the touch of Jesus. Unless we have that, we're stuffed. So I want to just explore those three areas in the next kind of 15 minutes or so. They both come to this conclusion, I don't have the resources. Listen to what was going on in the highlighted bits here. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. When he said, my daughter is dying, that kind of phrase it's going to happen ridiculously soon. She's sinking fast and she's going to drown. That's the idea. He's desperate. His daughter is dying. And yet here is Jairus, this synagogue ruler, who would never kind of fall at the feet of anyone. He would never run up to anyone. You wouldn't do that as a respectful man. And yet this is exactly what he's doing. In fact, before this comes in Mark chapter 5, but he's from this place called Capernaum. And before that, Jesus has already been in Capernaum loads. And he's been healing people, casting out demons, healing people, opening the eyes of the blind. He's been doing loads of good stuff, and people are amazed at his teaching. And yet, Jesus has done some of these miracles in a synagogue where Jairus is in charge. And yet he hasn't trusted in Jesus before. He hadn't really paid much attention to him as such. But here he is now, for the first time in his life, actually running up to Jesus, and he falls at his feet because he knows that he doesn't have the resources to deal with what is going on in his life. And I don't know if you're coming from that position today in life where you've done well, you drive the Ford Capri EV, and you've got a successful family, they're doing well at school, and things look good on the outside. But maybe things will come and do come into our lives, which actually then show us we haven't got it all together. We're not the people we thought we were. And Jairus comes to this recognition. Why? Because sadly for him, and so devastatingly, his daughter is dying. And so what does he do with his pain? He falls at the feet of Jesus when he realizes what he can't do. He can't cope with his own life. And I think different things come into our lives like that. If you ever watch horrible histories, there's the loud, shouty man who shouts out so loud you can't help but hear. There was a guy called C.S. Lewis who said that suffering in our lives is often a megaphone that God will use to rouse us to the fact that we need him. And if we just will turn to him, we will find life and we will find him bearing our burdens on his shoulders and lifting us up. And for this guy, it was the dying of his daughter that was getting him to this place where he realised, I don't have the resources. But then there's this nameless nobody, this lady. And we read in verse 25 there that she had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. And then in the highlighted bits, she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. So there's this lady with this severe kind of gynecological problem, and she could do nothing to stop this bleeding. She longed to just stop the pain and stop the flow and stop other people writing her off. She longed for help. And she spent, we're told, loads and loads of her money trying to get help. Now, you go back to those ancient times, and the Jews had this thing called the Talmud, and it was a whole bunch of descriptions about life, commentaries about life, and these are kind of sayings that are kind of built up over the centuries. But the Talmud talks about how there were 11 potential cures for this particular ailment that this lady had. And there were really weird ones, like, honestly, really weird. Like, if you want to be healed, then you need to go to the poo of a white she-donkey and pluck a corn out of its poo and carry it around with you. And that will heal you. It clearly didn't work, but those are the kind of ideas that were coming up. Here's another weird one. They were told that if you really want to be healed from this thing, you need to get 3 pints of onions, and not just any onions, Persian onions, good old Iranian onions, and you need to boil them in wine, and then you need to shout out, "Arise from your flux," and you'll be healed. But clearly that was not going to work either. Failing that, then what you could do is you could get the person, like this lady, at a junction in the road, and you'd get her, and it literally says this, holding a glass of wine in her right hand, and she's got to stand there, and all of a sudden, someone's got to run up behind her, out of the blue, and shout out, "Arise from your flux." And that was supposed to heal her as well. Now, I don't know the particular remedies that she had sought, but she had sought out with loads of money, with all of her resources, everything she had, to try and heal this, and none of these things worked. In fact, she tried everything, and yet there she was, still hemorrhaging blood, still hemorrhaging money. Everything had gone. She tried everything, and she realized, I can't handle my life. I can't bear the weight of my life. It's just too much for me. And we've heard brilliantly from Emma how she came to that realization as well, is that I can't handle my life. I've tried to be good, I've tried to do everything I can, but I don't have the resources. And I wonder tonight whether you're at that place as well, where you're going, look, I'm like this nameless nobody lady. No one's really thought much about me. No one's heard much about me. No one thinks much of me. But I realise as well, I can't handle my life. I realise I've tried to do that, but I just can't. And maybe you're at that place as well. What does she do? She reaches out and she touches Jesus. And then shortly, as we'll read, she also, like Jairus, falls at his feet. And it's Jesus' way of saying again that no matter who you are, whether you're well known or not, whether everyone thinks highly or not of you, that Jesus loves you and he's for you and wants you to come to him. So they both realise, I don't have the resources. But then they both go, well, I don't have the resources, who does? Clearly those weird and wacky remedies, they're not going to do it, and we might turn to all kind of weird and wacky things in our lives. But nothing is going to sort us unless it's the one who made us, unless we come to Jesus. And they see I need Jesus. The story goes on. At once Jesus realised, after the lady had touched him, that power had gone out from him. He turned round in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Now this might strike us a bit odd. I thought you thought you were saying Jesus is for me, and Emma's been saying Jesus is for you, and yet here Jesus is trying to expose this lady publicly. He said because he knows, being God in the flesh, he knows that someone has touched him, and he knows a healing has gone out from him, and he knows it is. But he asks this question nevertheless. And you think, what's he trying to do? Is he trying to kind of heap shame on her by getting her to come forward? You can imagine everything in her was like, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be exposed here. I'm grateful I've touched Jesus, but that's it. I need to kind of go off into the crowd. I need to go off into the distance now and live my life. You can imagine the shame that potentially would be there for her. So what's Jesus doing? Well, I think this lady has thought, if I just go to Jesus, I can get what I can from him. I'll touch him, and then I'll go. So kind of grab and go mentality. And maybe we have that mentality as well with Jesus. We think, I like him for this, but not for that. But what Jesus wants for her is, of course, in this particular instance, he wants her to be healed of what she's been going through. But he wants way more than that. He wants relationship with her. And I think that's what's so lovely to hear from Emma. She's saying that walking as a Christian is not easy, but you're there doing it every day. Every morning you're doing it. You wake up feeling a mess, and you do it with Jesus. You do it with the one who you know you can trust and rely on because he died and rose for you. And Jesus wants this lady to see something very, very similar. And you get that because of what he says, and we'll see that just in a short bit. But what I love also about that, before I talk about what he says to her, is what she says to him. It says, she came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And that whole truth, she speaks to him the whole truth. She pours out, in other words, her heart. And Jesus is like, I want you to pour out your heart to me. No matter what you're going through, no matter the pain, the trauma, the agony, whatever it is, I want the whole truth. I want you to talk, and I want you to pour it out to me. And I love that about Jesus, that he's not a God who doesn't want to hear from you, but he's exactly the God who does want to hear everything from you. No matter what it is, no matter all the ways we mumble and bumble and can't get our words out, it doesn't matter. He wants the whole truth. And this lady shares it with him, and he stops, and time stops, if you like, and he listens to what she has to say. And then he speaks these powerful words. He says, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. When he says the word daughter, that's the only time in the Gospels where he speaks to a grown adult female and calls them daughter. It's the only time he does it. He says this lady, this grown lady, daughter. And it's a term of endearment, a term of affection as for a child. And it's his way of saying, look, people have written you off. You're this nameless nobody, but to me you're not. You are daughter. You are family. And he looks at her and he loves her. And she would, no doubt, would have been melted in her heart as she thinks that Jesus doesn't want to just help me with this bit of physical healing here, which has been a mess for me, but he actually wants me. He wants to know me. And he's shown that by the fact he's listened. He's shown that by the fact that he's called a daughter. He says he wants relationship with her. And that's why, as she recognizes that and she trusts in him, that's why he says, now go in peace. Because to be at peace, and in the words of Jesus here, the word peace has this idea of being kind of reweaved back together, that we're like a bit of rope that's frayed and fallen apart and we've come unraveled. All of us are like that. But Jesus says, go in peace, because in him, he's the Prince of Peace who can ravel you back together. And when we unravel again, he can unravel us back again and again and again and again and again. And he says, go in peace. We're all like, there's this ancient kind of form of art, which I don't do because I'm not very arty, but a thing called kintsugi. I think it's from like the 14th century or something. And this whole idea is that you've got a broken vessel, a broken vase, a broken pot, and it's a mess, the pieces are everywhere. But there's this art form where you get this gold paste and you pick up the pieces and you gradually put them back together with the gold, this beautiful gold paste, re-solidifying the pot. So it's something actually that looks better despite the things you've gone through because of the kindness of the maker. And that's what Jesus does for us and for you. When you come to him in all your brokenness, he's there to help fix you and to make you the person you're always meant to be, to call you daughter or to call you son, so you can be in relationship with him. At this stage in the story, you think, wow, that's incredible what he's done for this lady, but you've got to remember also what's going on for Jairus. Remember that we started off with Jairus, his daughter's dying, and Jesus has stopped for ages and listened, and he's spoken so kindly to this lady. And she's moved, she's trusting in him, it's great for her. But you imagine poor Jairus at this point, he must have been spitting nails. He's come to Jesus going, Jesus, can you heal my daughter? And Jesus said, yes. And then he stopped. He's like, what are you doing, Jesus? And then this happens. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother to teach her anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. Now, this must have been absolutely shocking news to Jairus right here and then, because He knew his daughter was almost at death's door, and now he's been told that she has actually gone. She's died. And he must have been absolutely devastated, and he must have been thinking, why? Why this delay? Jesus, what are you doing? And maybe we're asking that question, why, Jesus, did he delay? And I think the reason he's doing that is because he wants Jairus to see that faith in Jesus is about trusting him despite everything else that's going on out there, despite everything that's going on in here and in here. It's about trusting him over our heart, over our head, over what we feel, over what we think. Going, Jesus, only you have the answers. And I think this is what Jesus is bringing about in this situation. And he's trying to also show Jairus and the lady and the crowds and us that if he's for someone like this lady who everyone despises, and he's also for Jairus, who everyone kind of looks up to, then he's for all of us who fit in somewhere on that scale in between. And Jesus is delaying so that we see what it is and what our greatest need is, which is for him in our lives. Well, Jesus went into the house, as we saw, and he said, while this commotion and wailing, the child is not dead, but asleep. Now, that's a bit of a weird phrase, because you know from other accounts, the other Gospels, two of the others write the same story down. And it's very clear from there that Jesus knows that she has died. And yet he uses this strange phrase, she's asleep, not dead. Why? Well, we'll read on, and this is the last bit of the story, which explains. He says, but they laughed at Jesus, because they all know she's dead. It's ridiculous when he's saying she's just asleep. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. So Jesus uses this phrase, little girl. And again, just as with the lady, it's a term of a major endearment, of love. It's like a loving mum would say to the kids. I don't think I could bring myself to call my kids honey, but my wife does things like honey and, I don't know, sweet pea, or all these kind of strange things, which are great. But it's that Jesus is actually more manly than I am, because he's actually going there and he's actually saying to her, honey. It's a term of endearment. He loves this girl. He's seen what's going on. And he calls her honey, little girl, in other words. And he says to her, get up. And it's like going into your kids' room in the morning and the sun's shining and you pull back the curtains and you say, honey, it's time to get up. And that's what Jesus speaks to this little girl. And he's showing us there that death is nothing but sleep for all who trust in him. In other words, because he was about to go and die and rise from the dead and beat death, he is able here, because he's the one, as we saw last night, is the resurrection and life. He's the one who's able to reach into death and to pull that little girl out of it and into life. And it's true that if we trust in Jesus, we will live with him forever, that he will be with us and hold our hands, and he will take us through death to the other side. What is why we don't need to fear the future when we have Jesus, because he promises he will be with us. And because he got through death, he will take us through it too. This little girl incredibly rises. And everyone must have been over the moon. Jairus must have been throwing a party poppers out, the cakes are out. Everyone was just loving what was going on. Jesus, this is incredible, they're thinking. They've realised, I don't have the resources. Jesus, you are the one we need. But I wanted just to end with this thought that Jesus' touch is crucial. Because I don't know, again, what you're thinking or where you're coming from in your life right now, but you need the touch of Jesus in your life. Remember, the little girl, it's Jesus who touches her hand. This lady, she reaches out and she touches Jesus. And it's as they have this connection with Jesus that things get transformed and things change for the better. And maybe you're here tonight and you're going, a bit like Emma's been talking about, I'm a right mess. I'm a right mess inside. And I've known that, but I've not wanted to admit that. But maybe like this lady tonight, you want to come before Jesus and be honest and say, Jesus, this is the whole truth. This is what I'm like. And I realise I don't have the resources. I realise that you do. You're the one I need. Well, if you're like that, it's interesting because back then, when someone died, they were declared unclean. When someone had a bleeding issue like this lady did, they were declared in that society as unclean. And many people, no doubt, would have thought, if someone touches Jesus with their uncleanness, if they touch him, they're going to contaminate him, and he's going to become unclean. Why make yourself unclean, Jesus? Why let that happen to you? And the reason why he let the unclean touch him is because he wanted to take on their uncleanness on himself so that he could then transfer over to them his cleanness. It's a picture of him saying, look, no matter what mess we come with, we lump it onto Jesus. And he's big enough and he's powerful enough and he's God enough to take it for us. And in return, what he does is he passes on his cleanness to us. That's what his death was all about, him taking on the mess of our world, the sin, the bad things we do in our lives, and him taking it on himself and passing over to us his cleanness so that we're right with him, so we're forgiven, so that we know we're dearly loved in our lives. And that's why on the screen there you've got this, the impure are made pure by the hands of Jesus. And I wonder tonight if you want to come to him with all your mess and say, Jesus, will you clean me up? Will you deal with all that's going on in there? Will you deal with all that's gone on in there? Will you deal with my past? Will you deal with my present? Will you deal with my future? If you want him tonight, why not come to him? Why not do what Jairus did? Why not do what the lady did? And they come and they fall at his feet and they say, Jesus, please will you deal with me? If you want to pray now, each night we're given an opportunity for people to respond by going, yeah, Jesus, I want you. And the way we're doing that is we're just saying, let's just say a prayer to God. Let's just ask him to come and forgive us because of what Jesus has done. And you know what? He will do that and he will come in and he will clean you up from the inside out. So if that's you tonight, if you want to receive Jesus, then why not pray with me right now? Let's pray. Dear God, I want to admit tonight that I don't have the resources. That all my life I've looked maybe to others, but certainly inside to myself to provide them and to deal with my life. But I know that's not been good. It's not been good to you. It's not been good to me. It's not been good to those around me. And Father, I want to turn from that tonight. I thank you so much that you gave Jesus for me. Thank you that he sees all of my mess and yet came for me still. Thank you that he died and rose again for me because of his love. And right now, Father, I ask that I would become one of your children, that I would be called daughter, that I would be called son. And that Jesus would be the one who walks with me and leads me from now on in. Father, please now would you give me Jesus? In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If you've prayed that tonight, then, and you meant that, that's brilliant, because then you're starting to know Jesus. And it's the start of a journey, and we'd love to explain a bit more about what it means now to walk with him and follow him. I've got these little booklets which explain a bit more. Come and ask me for one of those. If you'd rather not talk to me because I'm weird, which is true, then talk to someone else you know. Talk to Emma, talk to another Christian you've met tonight. But thank you so much. I'm going to hand back to Alan. Thank you.